You didn't expect this, did you? That quiet shift in your life, that strange pull towards someone younger. It feels almost forbidden, almost confusing, and yet deeply right. Something inside you is waking up, and it's unsettling because it's not following the rules you've always believed in. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal might change the way you see your past, your desires, and what's coming next. Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe and like this video, because what you're about to understand is something most men go their entire lives without ever realizing. You've been through things, real things, not surface-level heartbreak, not temporary attraction, but experiences that carve depth into your personality. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. When a man reaches a certain level of emotional awareness, he stops being attracted to what looks impressive on the outside and starts being drawn to what feels alive on the inside. And that's where the confusion begins. Because sometimes that energy, that aliveness, that curiosity about life, it shows up in someone younger. Not because you're trying to relive your past, not because you're avoiding maturity, but because something in you is evolving and it's seeking contrast. Younger doesn't always mean immature, and older doesn't always mean emotionally aligned. Let that sink in. What you're feeling right now isn't random. It's not a coincidence. There's a psychological shift happening inside you, one that most men ignore because they're afraid of how it looks. Society has trained you to question your instincts, to suppress anything that doesn't fit a clean narrative. But your mind, your emotional system, doesn't work based on social approval. It works based on resonance. And right now, you're resonating with something different. You're craving lightness after years of heaviness. You're drawn to curiosity after being surrounded by predictability. You're noticing a spark that you haven't felt in years, maybe even decades. But here's the part that hits deeper than you expect. It's not really about her age. It's about what she represents to your psyche. A reset, a new chapter, a version of yourself that you thought was gone. And that realization is where everything begins to change. What you're experiencing isn't just attraction, it's reflection. And most men completely miss this part because they're too focused on what's happening externally instead of asking the one question that actually matters. What is this awakening inside me trying to show me about myself? Because when a younger woman enters your awareness and something in you shifts, it's rarely about chasing youth. It's about reconnecting with a part of you that time, pressure, and responsibility slowly buried. Think about the man you used to be before life became heavy, before expectations shaped your decisions, before you learned to suppress your emotions just to function. There was a version of you that felt things deeply, that was curious, spontaneous, even a little reckless in the best way. That version didn't disappear, it just went quiet. And now, something is bringing it back. Her energy doesn't just attract you, it activates you. You notice how you speak differently around her. You feel more present, more aware, more alive. It's not forced. It's not something you're trying to manufacture. It's natural. And that's exactly why it unsettles you. Because deep down you realize you haven't felt this way in a long time. But here's the psychological truth most men aren't ready to face. You're not being pulled toward her because she's younger. You're being pulled toward how you feel when you're around her. That distinction changes everything, because it means this isn't about filling a void with another person. It's about recognizing that something inside you has been waiting to be felt again. Something authentic, something real. And yes, that can feel dangerous. Not because it's wrong, but because it disrupts the identity you've built. The stable, controlled, predictable version of yourself suddenly starts to crack. You begin questioning things you once accepted. You start seeing relationships differently. You feel less willing to settle for emotional disconnection. And that creates tension. Part of you wants to explore this new energy, and another part of you fears losing control. But understand this clearly. Growth always feels like instability at first. And what you're standing in right now isn't confusion, it's transformation. Something in your life is realigning. Not randomly, not accidentally, but in a way that's forcing you to confront the man you've become. and the man you're capable of being if you stop ignoring what you truly feel. There's something else happening here. Something deeper than attraction, deeper than curiosity. And if you don't understand it, you'll either sabotage it or lose yourself inside it. Because this connection you're feeling isn't just pulling you forward, it's also exposing you. It's showing you where you've become emotionally guarded, where you've chosen safety over truth, where you've slowly disconnected from your own needs just to maintain peace in your life. And now, suddenly, that's no longer enough. A younger woman's presence often carries a kind of emotional honesty that you're not used to anymore. She hasn't fully learned how to hide what she feels. She expresses, reacts, questions. And that level of openness does something powerful to a man who's been closed off for years. It challenges you, not aggressively, but quietly, consistently. You start noticing things about yourself that you used to ignore. The way you avoid vulnerability, the way you hold back your words, the way you've trained yourself to stay composed even when something inside you wants to break through. And her energy doesn't let that stay buried. That's why this feels intense. Because it's not just pulling you into her world, it's pulling you back into yourself. But here's where many men go wrong. They mistake this emotional activation for something they need to control, possess, or define too quickly. And that's where things collapse. Because what's happening here isn't meant to be rushed into a label. It's meant to be understood. This isn't about proving anything, not to her, not to anyone watching, not even to yourself. It's about awareness. You're being shown a mirror, and in that mirror, you're seeing both your potential and your limitations. You're seeing the man you are, and the man you could be if you allowed yourself to feel without filtering everything through fear or logic. And yes, that's uncomfortable, because it means you can't hide behind the version of yourself that feels safe anymore. You can't pretend you don't care when you clearly do. You can't go back to emotional numbness once you've felt this level of presence again. So now you're standing at a quiet crossroads, not between right and wrong, but between staying who you've been or becoming someone more honest, more aware, more alive than you've allowed yourself to be in years. There's a psychological pattern most men never recognize when this kind of connection appears. And it explains why it feels so magnetic, yet so unsettling at the same time. It's not just attraction, it's contrast. Your nervous system is responding to something it hasn't experienced in a long time. Emotional immediacy without calculation. No overthinking, no filtering, just presence. And when a man who has lived under responsibility, structure, and emotional restraint encounters that kind of energy, it creates internal disruption. Because part of you relaxes, and part of you becomes alert. You start noticing how differently you show up, how you listen more carefully, how you become more engaged in simple moments. Conversations feel lighter, but also more meaningful. Even silence feels different. And that difference is what your mind tries to explain away. It will say things like, "This is temporary," or "This is just chemistry," or "This doesn't make sense logically." But your emotional system doesn't operate on logic. It operates on resonance, and resonance doesn't ask permission. But here's the deeper layer most men never reach. This isn't just about her energy affecting you. It's about your suppressed emotional self responding to something it recognizes. A younger partner doesn't just represent youth. Psychologically, she often represents possibility, flexibility, emotional openness, a kind of mental space where things don't feel locked, rigid, or overdefined. And if you've spent years living inside structure, even emotional structure, that openness feels like oxygen. But oxygen can feel overwhelming if you've been holding your breath for too long. That's why you feel both drawn in and slightly destabilized. Because this connection is not reinforcing your old identity, it's challenging it. And the human mind doesn't always welcome what expands it. It often resists it first. You may find yourself analyzing everything, overthinking meanings, trying to categorize what this is before it fully unfolds. But the truth is, some experiences are not meant to be immediately defined. They are meant to be experienced with awareness first. And what you're standing in right now is one of those experiences. Something inside you is shifting in real time. and whether you move with that shift or resist it will determine whether this becomes confusion or clarity you've been missing for years. Now here's where things get even more uncomfortable, because this is the part where most men misinterpret what's actually happening inside them. When a connection like this intensifies, the mind starts projecting stories onto it. You begin asking questions that sound logical but are actually driven by fear. Is this appropriate? Am I making a mistake? What will people think? Does this mean something is wrong with me? But notice something important. None of those questions are actually about the connection itself. They're about control. Because what you're feeling is uncontrollable in the way your emotions usually are. It doesn't fit neatly into your past experiences. It doesn't behave like the predictable patterns you're used to. And anything unpredictable forces the mind into analysis mode. But psychology tells us something very important here. When emotional suppression has been present for a long time, the nervous system doesn't just crave pleasure, it craves emotional freedom. Not chaos, freedom. And that distinction matters, because what you're drawn to isn't disorder, it's relief from emotional rigidity. You're not chasing something irresponsible, you're responding to something within you that wants to breathe again. And sometimes, that breath of emotional renewal is triggered by someone who hasn't yet closed off the way life taught you to. But here's the truth most men overlook. She is not the solution. She is the trigger. What she activates in you already exists inside you. That sense of aliveness, curiosity, emotional presence. It didn't come from her. It was inside you, waiting for something to wake it up. And now that it's awake, you have a choice. You can project it outward and become dependent on the feeling, or you can recognize it as a part of yourself returning. This is where emotional maturity is tested. Not in attraction, but in awareness. Because if you misunderstand this moment, you'll think the answer is in holding on to the person. But if you understand it deeply, you'll realize the answer is in integrating what she awakened in you. That version of you, the more open, more emotionally connected, more present version, was never lost. It was just dormant. And now it's asking a very quiet question. Are you willing to become that man again, without needing external permission to feel alive? There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes something both simple and unsettling. Not every connection enters his life to stay, but every meaningful connection enters to reveal. And this is where your situation becomes psychologically profound, because what you're feeling isn't random attraction, it's emotional reactivation. It's your inner system responding to a type of presence that bypasses your usual defenses. You're not negotiating feelings anymore, you're experiencing them directly, and that changes how you see yourself. You might notice subtle shifts. The way you think about relationships feels less rigid. Your emotional reactions feel more honest, less filtered. Even your imagination becomes more active, more open. And that openness can feel unfamiliar if you've spent years prioritizing control over expression. But here's what you need to understand clearly. This doesn't mean you're losing control. It means you're regaining access to parts of yourself you trained to silence. Psychologically, when a man reaches emotional fatigue from responsibility, expectation, or repeated disappointment, his system starts to simplify emotional input. He stops engaging deeply. He becomes efficient, logical, guarded. And then suddenly, something breaks that pattern. Not violently, but gently, through feeling. And that feeling doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives. Now, your mind will try to interpret this as something external you need to act on. But your deeper awareness is being invited into something more important than action: integration. Because what you're encountering isn't just a person, it's a state of being you haven't visited in a long time. Presence without pressure, emotion without calculation, connection without performance. And once you experience that again, it becomes impossible to pretend you don't understand what's missing in your life. But here's the critical part. Awareness alone is not enough. You have to decide what you do with it. Because you can either become someone who chases the feeling outward, always searching for the next trigger, or you can become someone who recognizes the feeling as proof of who you already are underneath everything you've built to protect yourself. This is the quiet turning point most men miss. Not because it's hidden, but because it requires honesty instead of impulse. And in that honesty, something powerful becomes clear. What is real in you doesn't depend on who enters your life. It depends on whether you're willing to stay emotionally awake once you've been reawakened. And now we arrive at the truth that changes everything. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is quietly undeniable once you see it. What you've been feeling was never just about her. It was about what your life has been missing while you were busy becoming everything you thought you were supposed to be. Responsibility shaped you. Experience refined you. Loss may have hardened you in places you didn't even notice. And over time, without realizing it, you learned to function more than you learned to feel. But something in you never fully accepted that trade. And that is why this connection feels so powerful, because it interrupts the version of you that was only surviving emotionally. Now listen carefully. When life brings a dynamic like this into your awareness, it is rarely about possession, pursuit, or outcome. It is about awakening. A younger partner in your experience may symbolize something deeper than age. She may represent the emotional permission you forgot you were allowed to have. Not immaturity, not fantasy, but emotional openness without constant defense. And your system recognizes that instantly. That recognition is what feels like attraction, but underneath it is remembrance. You are remembering what it feels like to be fully present in your own life again, and that is not something you should fear, but it is something you should understand. Because if you misunderstand it, you will think you need to hold on to a person to keep the feeling alive. But if you understand it clearly, you will realize something far more empowering. No person is the source of your emotional aliveness. They are only the mirror that shows you where it still exists inside you. And now that you've seen it, you cannot unknow it. So the real question is not whether this connection is right or wrong, not whether it fits expectations or challenges opinions. The real question is, will you allow yourself to remain emotionally awake after this moment fades or evolves into something else? Because what's being aligned here is not just people, it is awareness, it is emotional truth, it is the return of a part of you that refuses to stay asleep any longer. And once a man sees that clearly, he never experiences connection the same way again.